Dr. Wu, thank you very much for accepting our interview. So we have seen the report of Mr. Michael Melham believing that he had COVID-19 last November, and there are a lot of questions, of course. What do you think is the credibility of his own account? How likely is it that he got coronavirus last November and only testing positive for antibody in April?
Well, actually, he's a public figure. I guess what he said is credible information. And the thing is that, when he described his symptoms in last November, I think they're all very typical COVID-19 infection. Basically, we observed later in the clinic. And the reason why he did not test early is because we did not really know exactly what kind of infection was. When China started in identify the initial cases, cluster cases in Wuhan, I think so that's why he just conducted a recent test. If you look at his clinical symptoms and also the IgG positive results, I think my feeling is that it is COVID-19.
You think it is COVID-19. However, there are some questions. For instance, he didn't have the respiratory symptoms that other cases, that COVID cases typically have, although he told journalists that he was taking this medicine called something like Z-Pad. So could it be possible that he had all the other symptoms without the respiratory symptoms, which should be there?
Well, actually, when I look at his interview, he did mention that he did have some respiratory symptoms. So that's one of the reasons why he uses Z-Pad. And basically, Z-Pad could help you to breathe and then clean up the upper respiratory constellation.
There are other questions as well. For instance, there are people who say that it might have just been an especially aggressive flu case. What's the possibility of that?
Well, actually, there is a certain possibilities because, last year there was a rampaging flu season in the U.S. My bet is that, among those flu cases, there are quite a few COVID-19. That's what the information provided by NIH as well. So it's very hard to tell right now, how many of those flu cases are actually COVID-19 because nobody knew at that time.
But from a medical perspective, what would help people differentiate the symptoms of a bad flu or the symptoms of COVID-19? Could the person who contracted it tell the difference?
Well, it's a very hard for a person to tell the difference if you are not in the medical profession. But as this Mayor Michael Melham mentioned that he actually rarely had such a strong reaction or strong symptoms when the flu infected him. So apparently this time it was very distinct in terms of clinical symptoms. The other thing is that in terms of medical confirmation, the CT scan is very important to confirm because that's very unique. You get a glassy lung image. So, based on his description and his past health experience, my bet is he didn't have COVID-19.
Is it possible that he had a flu, he had a bad flu, and then as coronavirus started to spread very rapidly in the United States, he also contracted the coronavirus, but not to his knowledge. He didn't show symptoms, and then he tested positive for antibody. What's the possibility of that?
There is a certain possibility for that. But if you look at his IgG positive results, which suggests that actually this IgG is indicating the early infection because it's
when you say RTT,
situation.
When you say IgG test, it means antibody testing, right?
It's an antibody, yeah.
Okay, because he was talking about it. Yeah, go ahead.
He was talking about his antibody testing, and apparently he was negative in IgM, which suggests that this is new infection, not an acute infection. So he was positive for IgG, suggesting that he actually had early infection, but right now he recovered.
What would be the time difference between an acute infection and an earlier infection? What are we talking about? Weeks, a month, or 2 or 3?
It could be weeks, but this actually very much depends on individuals. For some people, actually, you may have a much quicker conversion from IgM to IgG, but for some people, it may be a lot slower. But the bottom line is that you start with IgM, and then in the middle, there is a certain period that you do have a so-called double positive, IgM and IgG. And then later on, when you recover, actually the IgG would last a little while.
So basically, the Mayer has this longer version of antibody. Is it also possible, could it be possible at all, that you never contracted the virus, but you develop antibody?
Well, actually, I don't think that's the possibility, because if you look at how you generate the antibody, you have to have the antigen first. The antigen apparently comes from the virus. So you have to conflict the virus first to generate the antibodies. So basically, there is the cause and the reason, the causal relationship. You can't have an antibody without an antigen.
So basically, you're saying if you have tested positive for antibody, it means that you must have contracted the virus sometime in the past.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, so in the case of this Mayer, he must have contracted this virus sometime in the past few months, let's say, exactly when we wouldn't know. But is it also possible that during earlier this year, for instance, in January or February, when he was busy, helping people fight this virus, he might have caught it, but without his knowledge? Could it have been possible at all? Because he personally say in his interview that he felt great. He didn't feel at all necessary to go into the hospital, or he didn't feel any symptom. Could it have been possible?
Well, actually, it is possible, but based on what he described, actually in 2019 in November, actually had such a clear and similar symptoms as COVID-19. You see, my analysis and the conclusion that he did get infection in that month, and then later on he recovered. I mean, of course, there is a possibility theoretically, but I don't think in this case.
Why not?
Well, actually, first the asymptomatic infection, actually, you do have certain percentage of people. But if you have the IgG positive situation in your blood, and also in early stage you do have such highly similar symptoms, my rational conclusion is that he actually was infected in November, and later on was confirmed by IgG test. Of course, in terms of this, when it was infected, actually it's a more complicated issue.
How can we find out for sure? For instance, for this Mayer, if he wants to find out exactly when he got the virus, is there any possibility at this moment?
Well, actually, right now, I don't think you have the possibility to find out exactly when he was infected, because we already passed the time frame to determine whether, the best thing is when he was feeling bad and he had all the COVID-19 symptoms, and then he carried out some kind of, nucleic acid analysis and confirmed he was infected.
So what do you
right now, with all
go ahead.
Right now, all we could do is that based on his symptomatic presentation and his positive IgG outcome, and then we deduct how this event actually developed.
Yeah. So what do you think will help people understand the picture better? What do you think needs to be done?
Well, actually, I think in the U.S. definitely they should broaden the COVID-19 testing. One of the problems is that I talked to friends a few days ago, both in the East Coast and the West Coast, that the testing is still rather limited. I think the U.S. the Trump administration set the testing bar too high. One of the critical that you do a broaden test when you have some very basic symptoms. Then you make sure that person is either infected or not infected. Then you can take certain public health or approach to quarantine person.
Is it accurate, these antibody tests? How accurate are they?
Well, actually, the antibody test, as the mayor mentioned, that he used quite a credible company's product, which is highly reliable. So I would think that this is, it's a very reliable product, and we do produce a lot of reliable products as well. I think in the general, that the antibody testing are quite reliable, whether you do have the antibody or whether you don't.
So the answer should be pretty clear. It's either a yes or no.
I would think so, yeah.
All right.
I would think so. I mean, the other thing is that to confirm, as he mentioned in the interview, that he could take a nucleic acid testing or do further antibody testing.
So you think that's what he should be doing?
I would think so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what if the results come out that he is, again, antibody positive but virus negative? That would reconfirm, basically, that he contracted the virus sometime in the past and now he has recovered, right? Is that what we're going to see?
Exactly. That would be my conclusion, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Beijing. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got the point.